The station hummed. It always hummed, a low, bone-deep resonance that you stopped noticing after your third week aboard. Mara Chen had been here 11 months, which meant she felt it only when she was afraid. And right now, with the proximity alarms painting the observation deck in slow red pulses, she felt it like a second heartbeat. "Count?" she asked. Omar Vasquez didn't look up from his console. His fingers moved across the haptic interface with the unhurried precision of a man defusing something, or building something. It was always hard to tell with Omar. 47 vessels, he said. Destroyer class or above. They came out of fold space about 12 minutes ago. I've been watching them slow down. Slowing down means they're not passing through. He finally looked up. His eyes were calm in a way that unsettled her more than panic would have. They're parking. The 8 of them gathered in the central hub within minutes. Mara ran through the roster the way she always did in emergencies, a private inventory, a way of steadying herself. Omar at the communications array. Yusuf at systems. Dr. Priya Okafor, their medic, who had never treated anything worse than a chemical burn until today. The twins, Sasha and Fawn, who maintained the broadcast coils and moved through the station's crawlspaces like water. Retired naval engineer Benedict, 63 years old, who had more experience with Keth military hardware than anyone alive because he'd spent 4 years as a prisoner of it. And Tomas, their logistics coordinator, soft-spoken and meticulous, who maintained their supply manifests with a love bordering on devotion. 8 technicians. No weapons. No warships. No help within 6 hours at best, and the Keth fleet, because it was the Keth, everyone knew it was the Keth, had already begun jamming their standard distress frequencies. They're not jamming everything, Omar said, almost to himself. What? Standard distress bands, NAV beacons, the emergency military channels, all blocked. He pulled up a frequency map, a glowing web of dead zones spread across the spectrum. But they left the broadcast array untouched. Benedict leaned over his shoulder. Because they want it intact. They're not here to destroy Echo Station. They're here to take it. The room went quiet in a particular way, the quiet of people doing the same math and arriving at the same answer. Whoever controlled Echo Station could reach every ship, every colony, every listening post within 500 light years. The Keth had been consolidating for years. A message broadcast from here, in the right voice, with the right authority codes, could dissolve a treaty, trigger an evacuation, or summon a fleet. It was the most powerful communication instrument ever constructed, and 8 unarmed technicians were the only thing standing between it and an empire that had been patient enough to wait for exactly this moment. We can't fight them, Priya said. No, Omar agreed. Then we stall. Yusuf pulled up the docking protocols. Lock down the external airlocks, cycle the atmosphere in the approach corridors, make them work for every centimeter. Buy time for a rescue. 6 hours minimum, Mara said. We can't hold the airlocks that long. 4, maybe, if we're clever about. We're not stalling, Omar said. Everyone looked at him. He had that expression again, the one Mara had seen exactly twice before, both times in the aftermath of something that had seemed impossible until he'd done it. Not arrogance. Something quieter and more dangerous than arrogance. We're going to broadcast, he said. Broadcast what? Sasha asked. A distress call they're already jamming? No. Omar turned back to his console and began pulling files. Encrypted packets, deep cached, stored in a partition of the array that wasn't visible from the station's standard manifest. About 4 months ago, we received a transmission that wasn't meant for us. It came in on a frequency the Keth use for internal military routing. They didn't account for Echo Station sensitivity. Most arrays would have filtered it as noise. He paused. We're not most arrays. He opened the first packet. Dense columns of encoded data bloomed across the screen. I've had 4 months to decrypt it, he said. Priya helped with the linguistic architecture. Benedict helped with the tactical structure. What we have, what's sitting in this partition right now, is approximately 60% of the Keth Empire's operational war plan for the next 2 years. Fleet dispositions. Supply chain vulnerabilities. Colony resource allocations. And, he pulled up a secondary file, the names of every Keth military commander who has been siphoning imperial funds into private accounts on the Outer Rim colonies. The silence this time was different. Charged. The Keth Empire is not a unified thing, Omar continued. It looks unified from the outside because they want it to look that way. But there are 17 distinct colony systems with active grievances against the Central Command. There are 4 Outer Rim governors who have been waiting for a sign that the Imperial fleet is weaker than advertised. There is, by my count, a civil war sitting inside the Keth Empire like a coal waiting for oxygen. He turned to face them fully. We can't fight 47 warships. But we don't have to. We just have to give the rest of the Keth Empire a reason to make those 47 ships turn around. The next 2 hours were the most precise work Mara had ever done. Omar directed and Yusuf executed, and the 2 of them together were something to witness. Omar seeing 4 moves ahead, Yusuf translating vision into code with a speed that made it look like instinct. They shaped the broadcast carefully. Not a single explosion of data, which could be dismissed as a hack or a fabrication. Instead, a sequence, the financial corruption files first, targeted at specific colony frequencies, personalized to individual governors and fleet admirals who had the most to gain from destabilization. Then the war plans, routed to the independent systems that the Keth had been planning to absorb, giving them specific windows and fleet positions. Then, last, a simple, undeniable proof of authenticity package. The Keth fleet commander's own biometric command signature, extracted from the routing headers of the original intercepted transmission. It would look, to anyone receiving it, like the transmission had come from inside the Empire. Because, in a way, it had. 40 minutes to completion, Yusuf said. Once we start broadcasting, they'll know what we're doing. I know, Omar said. They'll breach the station. I know. Do you want us to? Sasha, Fawn, seal every internal bulkhead between the docking rings and the hub. Benedict, the emergency atmosphere protocols. Priya, get the medical kit and move everyone to the core server room. It's the most structurally reinforced space on the station. He paused. And it buys us the 40 minutes we need. Mara grabbed his arm as the others moved. They will get through. Yes. He said it without hesitation, which was somehow worse than if he'd tried to reassure her. They will get through. The question is what's happening in the Empire by the time they do. They were 22 minutes into the broadcast when Tomas's comm unit chimed. It was a small sound, barely audible over the hum of the array. But Omar heard it, and Mara saw him hear it, saw the slight tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible steadying of his posture, and something shifted in her understanding of the last hour. Tomas silenced the comm with a thumb. His face was very still. They're asking you to stop the broadcast, Omar said. Not a question. Tomas said nothing for a moment. Then, how long have you known? 7 weeks. Mara felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her, not physically, but in the way that comprehension can briefly destabilize the world. The supply manifests, Omar said. You're meticulous, Tomas. That's the thing about meticulous people. When they make a mistake, it's visible. 7 weeks ago, there was a 40-minute gap in the station's external comm log that your manifest listed as a diagnostic cycle. It wasn't. I ran a background trace. And you said nothing. I needed to know what they were telling you. And I needed you to not know I was listening. He finally turned to look at Tomas directly, and his voice, when it came, was not unkind. They told you the station would be taken peacefully. That we'd be transported off, unharmed. That it was better to cooperate than to resist. Tomas's jaw worked. They promised. I know what they promised. Omar pulled up a secondary screen, logs, communications, a quiet archive of 7 weeks of Tomas's transmissions. I also know what they didn't tell you. The war plan we're broadcasting right now includes provisions for Echo Station's permanent crew. He let that sit for a moment. There's no transport scheduled, Tomas. There's no accommodation. We were never going to be relocated. The color left Tomas's face slowly, like water draining. You used me, he said. Everything I passed to them. Everything you passed to them told me what they knew and what they didn't. What frequencies they were monitoring. Which of our capabilities they were afraid of. Omar gestured at the broadcast array, at the cascade of data still pouring outward across 500 light-years. I knew they'd leave the array unblocked because you told them we had no contingency for it. I knew the exact composition of their boarding party because their response protocols, which you described, require a specific team configuration. He paused. I knew how much time we had. You could have told me. Tomas's voice had gone to something raw and quiet. You could have confronted me. I might have. You might have stopped cooperating with them. And then they'd have sent someone else, and I'd have had nothing. Omar held his gaze. I'm sorry. I needed you in the dark. That was a real cost, and I knew it. The silence stretched. 31 minutes into the broadcast, the first confirmation signal came back from the Keth Outer Rim, not in their frequency, but detectable as a massive surge in military comm traffic originating from 3 different colony systems simultaneously. Omar watched the readout. His expression didn't change. It's working, Yusuf said quietly. The boarding party reached the hub's outer door at 38 minutes. They were methodical and they were fast and there were 12 of them, and there was nothing to be done about that. The door opened and they came through in formation, and every weapon in the room was pointed at 8 technicians who had never fired anything more lethal than a pneumatic seal gun. The Keth commander was a tall figure in angular armor, and she looked at the broadcast array, and then at Omar, with an expression that Mara couldn't fully read through the visor but felt, somehow, like the first honest moment the station had seen in days. You transmitted, the commander said. 42 minutes, Omar confirmed. You have a very efficient boarding team. You understand what you've done. I understand exactly what I've done. The commander was silent for a long moment. Behind her visor, something was happening, some private calculation, some reassessment. Her comm unit was chiming, Mara realized. Chiming and chiming, not with the ordered cadence of tactical updates but with the irregular insistence of something going wrong in multiple places simultaneously. The Outer Rim colonies, Omar said, quietly, like a man naming something that was already known. The Tessevar sector, probably, and the Hund convocation. Possibly the 3 systems along the Red Line corridor, if the governors there are as ready as the intelligence suggested. He tilted his head. Your fleet was sent here as part of an expansion campaign. That campaign is now public information, and the systems it planned to absorb are armed with specifics. Your fleet commanders whose financial corruption is currently broadcasting to every military tribunal in range are, I suspect, not responding to your orders. The chiming continued. You cannot hold this station, Omar said. Not today. Possibly not ever. Because the moment any ship in your fleet attempts to transmit from Echo Station's array, every civilization within 500 light-years will receive it, and right now, the signal they're waiting for is one that tells them the Keth Empire is exactly as vulnerable as it appears. He paused. Occupation becomes advertisement. The boarding party held their positions. The commander's hand, Mara noticed, had not moved toward a weapon. What do you want? The commander said at last. Same thing I've wanted for the last 42 minutes, Omar said. For you to go home and deal with the empire you have. They left. It took another 3 hours, and there was a long period where it wasn't clear they would, and Mara spent most of that time sitting against the wall of the hub with her knees drawn up and her eyes on the boarding party's weapons. But the comm traffic from the Outer Rim kept building, a visible tide of crisis on the frequency monitors, and at some point the math changed, and the commander made a decision, and the ships began to move. When the proximity alert finally showed the fleet in fold preparation, Yusuf made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Benedict sat down heavily in a chair and covered his face with his hands. Priya put her hand on Mara's shoulder and kept it there. Tomas stood by the observation window and watched the ships go. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally turned from the glass, his expression was something Mara didn't have an easy word for. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but perhaps the beginning of both, mixed with something harder that would take longer to name. Omar was still at his console. His fingers had finally stilled. What happens now? Sasha asked. When the rescue ship gets here. When they debrief us. What do we? We tell the truth, Omar said. All of it. Including Tomas. A beat. Including Tomas. Tomas didn't flinch. Maybe he'd expected it. Maybe, Mara thought, some part of him was even relieved. And the Keth Empire? Yusuf asked. The civil war we didn't start it, Omar said. We just gave it the information it needed to find itself. He finally pushed back from the console, finally let his shoulders drop from the precise, held-in tension that had sustained the last 4 hours. He looked tired in a way that was different from exhaustion, something older, more considered. The war plans were real. The corruption was real. Whatever happens next, the Keth Empire was carrying those things before we broadcast them. We just made them visible. Is that better? Mara asked. He thought about it. Omar always actually thought about questions, which was either one of his best qualities or most exhausting, depending on the day. I think secrets held by the powerful, he said at last, are a different kind of weapon than secrets held by the powerless. We didn't create a war. We redistributed some information that was already shaping one. He looked at the array, at the frequencies still active, still rippling outward, carrying their cargo of consequence into the dark. Whether that's better depends on what the Keth Empire decides to do with the truth. The station hummed. Mara felt it still. But differently now, not a second heartbeat, but something external, a frequency the station had always been built around. A machine designed, at its core, for one purpose, to be heard. Outside the observation window, the last of the Keth ships folded into nothing, leaving only stars. The rescue ship arrived 4 hours and 17 minutes later. The official debrief lasted 9 days. The Tessevar Convocation declared independence from the Keth Central Command 11 weeks after that. The Civil War, when historians later wrote about it, began, officially, technically, with a 42-minute broadcast from a station no one had been paying attention to. The signal, once sent, could not be recalled. That was, Omar had always known, precisely the point.